Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Badass Unicorn Summer Series, a program of intimate conversations with some of my most badass friends. This series aims to provide honest, motivating, and no-nonsense perspectives from people who've been there, muddied the t-shirt, to inspire you as part of your own personal development journey. I've carefully selected a set of aspirational guests who've done some incredible things, but who I think we'll find are actually very much just like you and I. Through their stories and wisdom, I hope you'll find some pertinent nuggets that will fuel your growth and help you to realize your dreams. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my next podcast guest, David McQueen. David is one of those people that others gravitate towards, and I'm incredibly lucky to call him one of my personal mentors. Funnily enough, I saw David speak at the same conference where I met Kate, who also appears on this series. I don't think I'd ever seen someone speak who was so enthralling. He had the audience eating out the palm of his hand. Since then, I've had the privilege to get to know the man behind the stage, and he's just as inspiring, whether it's through his directorship of various businesses around leadership development and diversity and inclusion, public speaking, or just via the bold presence that he holds on LinkedIn. This man is always lighting up a room somewhere. David, thank you for giving us your time today. Welcome.
Thank you. I need you as my wing woman to introduce me every time I go to speak. I really love that. And yeah, it has been an amazing journey. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, very special to have you here. So, David, some people might recognize you from LinkedIn, but I'd love to just start by exploring a bit more about your journey. Yes. You were, as I called you in my notes, an Excel wizard, which probably doesn't do you justice, but now you're this extremely successful thought leader. Can you tell us a bit about that path that you've been on and how you've gotten here?
No, fantastic. Yeah. So the Excel wizardry bit came about because my first career was in accounts. And I was really taken in by Excel and what it could do and the way you were able to display data and get people to actually make really good decisions based on very good information. Didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of the work that I did around Excel resulted in a lot of accountants being able to explain a lot of the stuff that they did to non-accountants a lot better. And what it meant was that I ended up spending a lot of time just getting people to be able to be a lot more confident about sharing their information. And then when I transitioned out of doing accounts into IT, I was still doing reports. I was still getting people to present, still doing stuff around project management. And I really loved that. And it really made me realize that my calling was around communication. My calling was always going to be around how can I get people to communicate better and how can I get them to recognize that there are stories, there are narratives, there are ways of being able to bring data alive. And so I realized that often I took for granted that I could stand on a stage or stand in a meeting or be anywhere and be able to talk to people regardless of what the subject matter was. And what I wanted to do was be able to share to other people how they could do that. And so to your point, I started off doing, when I left corporate and I started to do my own business, it was split between doing corporate work and getting people to be better at presenting and being a lot more confident, whether it was around interviews or big stage presentations or pitches or what have you. But on the other hand, I used to do a lot of work in schools as well, because I really thought it's all well and good teaching adults how to do this, but if we could instill that behavior from quite young and getting young people to be really confident about owning their story and telling and speaking and holding their own, that was really important. And so over the last 15 or so years, been working on that. But in the last 5, what I realized was one of the key ways to really establish this and scale it out was to work with leaders. Because when leaders get hold of it and they can cascade that down the organization, whether that was school leaders at the time or whether it was corporate leaders, being able to understand those principles around confidence and around communication were pivotal to just getting people to have agency to be able to tell their own story. So whether it's my coaching, my mentoring, my speaking, whatever it is, my thing is always about, okay, I know this might be a bit scary and we've had these conversations, right? I know it might be a bit scary jumping out there on your own and doing this stuff, but let's ask some questions. Let's think about how you're going to communicate to the wider world, why what you're telling people will actually make a difference for them.
Amazing. So talking about those initial stages when you moved from the corporate ladder to doing your own thing, one of the conversations that we've had, and I think it's important to have, was the kind of gradual process from being full-time employed by the man to working for yourself to then moving into your area of genius. And I remember early on when you were transitioning, you were still doing quite a lot of like freelance work in the kind of IT and Excel space, and you didn't just jump in and become successful at running a leadership training company, did you?
No, 100%. And I think for at least I'd say about the first 18 months or so, and being able to have my own training company, I was like, okay, I'm not going to go and loan money. No one's going to go and invest in me. I need to have some money to pay bills and all the rest of it. What's the stuff that I'm really good at? And I knew I was still really good at Excel. And I mean, to be fair, up until about maybe 3 years ago, I was still doing Excel, because I'd still have individuals who were pitching for big finance from companies, and they'd be like, oh, I don't know how to do this. And I find myself all the time, it is what it is, but going back and falling back on that skill set. So somebody would like, I need to be able to do this cash flow forecast or P&L, or get people to understand this. And I'll go, you're doing it wrong. You need to do this. And I'll go back into accounts mode. But for the first 18 months or so of doing the business, it was really being able to fall back onto that, so I could have my a consistent cash flow. I didn't market it as much as the main business, because obviously I was making them that transition, but people still knew that I could help. And what it was, and I always say, I said it to you and I say it to others, is sometimes when we are moving into a specific space or a new area, sometimes we've got to fall back on the things that are really good, or that we know that we do really well, as a means of funding and supporting this new movement that we're going into. And then when we hit the ground running, and you are getting that money as a presentations trainer or doing the stuff around leadership development, then you can start to kind of like phase that out and find other people to do it. But very often people think that they just got to jump in feet first to be able to do this straight away. And I'm like, nah, that's not how it works. Unless you've got a very rich parent or uncle or trust fund that you can pull on, it just doesn't work that way.
No, exactly. And even once you're established, I mean, myself, I'm coming back from maternity leave now, and I've been lucky that I've got to do some of the jobs that I really love. But actually recently I've taken on a project where I'm doing some more like facilitated conversations, more like some of the stuff that you do with, you know, the exec teams, but mine's not Mercedes-Benz and, you know, JP Morgan yet. But that wouldn't necessarily be something that like I would have gone out there to pitch to get myself, but it came along, and actually I think I would be good at it. It uses my skill sets. It's in the area of genius that I've got. And sometimes you have to take jobs that keep the lights on, not just the ones that light you up inside.
No, 100%. And I think it really is about having a sense of self-awareness. And you know, one of my letter this week is I start to talk about mentoring and why I think mentoring is so important. Because, you know, again, as you said, if you're starting out on this journey a lot later than I did, for me, I have a duty of care and responsibility to be able to say to you, okay, well, these are some of the things that I've learned along the way, and what I want to be able to demonstrate to you is how you can navigate those spaces, but how you can navigate them without feeling, oh my God, I have to have all the answers. And I can't fall back, again, as you said, on your areas of genius. And being able to, being able to just to pull down on those specific resources whilst you're, being able to pull down on that area of genius, as you said before, is so important, because it doesn't make you lose the direction you're going in. You may have a plan to, you know, take Badass Unicorn to be this massive global company and what have you. But in the meantime, while you're doing this, yes, you probably are going to have some conversations that are incredibly important in your build up to do it. And as a very brilliant young lady I know recently said, you know, take a big chance and follow your scent.
Well, there you go. You're playing back my own little anecdotes. There you go. So are there any other tips that you would give people as part of that transition, and thinking about the success that you've achieved? Is there anything that stands out to you as being things that you've done that you'd suggest other people try to perhaps mimic or find their own version of?
I think the first bit of feedback that I always get from individuals, and I don't necessarily like the word sometimes because it gets overused, but I like when people tell me that I'm authentic, so they know exactly where they stand with me. And I believe that's important. I think that's part of a USP that is not as underrated. That I don't think people jump on it as much as they could. But being yourself, showing up very often, and you'll see this as well, very often we are working with individuals who struggle with the alignment between who they are and who they want to be. And I made sure that I surrounded myself with individuals who would not only reaffirm what I knew I was doing, but wouldn't try to play down the fact that I am who I am. And I have had people who have come into my life who have tried to quieten down certain parts of me. David, I don't want you to use strong language, or be very, very wary of avoiding topics like race or inclusion or gender. Go in there and show people how they can make money. I'm like, to hell with that. That's not who I am. I can show you how to get to the bottom line, but we're people, we're humans, and we're interacting all the time. And so those individuals who were able to affirm and who reaffirm who I am and to give me a sense of agency, they really, 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 really helped. So I always say to be authentic, and because from that authenticity is where your confidence comes. Your confidence is the evidence of all the things you've done when you showed up in your genius. So you know exactly what it is. When your confidence gets knocked, it's usually because sometimes you're stepping outside of your comfort zone and it's something that you don't really have experience with. Whereas for me, when you're really like, I'll go onto any stage in the world and speak. Why? Because I've been doing it for bloody, 34 odd years of my life. Don't care where it is, I'll absolutely go and speak. Do I get nervous? Of course I get nervous, but I know that's where my area of competence is. And so for me, it is that authentic piece. And the second bit I would say is, which aligns to it, is just being able to surround yourself with people who will help you with that authenticity. Who's your personal board of advisors? Who's your mentors, your coaches, your friends, your family? Individuals who won't blow smoke up your ass, but who will definitely say, this is where you're doing really well. This is the areas that you can improve on. And here we are, we're going to stay with you to keep you accountable and support you on growing in that way.
Lovely. Yeah, I think the authenticity point is so crucial because I remember hearing this term. They said, if you tell the truth, you never have to remember anything.
Yes.
And I just thought that was so powerful, that if you just show up as you and you don't bullshit.
Yes.
You don't have to try anything on. You're just trying to be yourself. And that's actually quite freeing when you allow yourself that space to do it.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%. And you probably hear me say online and to you as well, this is one of the reasons why I veer away from the whole concept of faking it till you make it. Because I'm like, you're already brilliant as you are. Okay, something brought you to this place, whether it's your experience, whether it's your education, whatever it is. And we are constantly learning. All right. I know, look, I'm 53 now. And I can tell you within the last 3 years, I've probably had one of the steepest learning curves in my life ever, just because I've been a hell of a lot more curious. And I think there's so much more to learn, far from a finished article. I think the only time I'm a finished article is when they put me in the ground, right? That's it, everything's done. But up until then, it's always about being curious and learning and finding out more about yourself. So when people tell you to fake it, why would you have to fake it? To your point, again, as you said, you tell the truth so that a lie you have to remember, a truth you never have to, because it is the truth. So for me, it really is about getting individuals that will reiterate to you that your confidence is worthy, you deserve to be in certain spaces, and then working on that.
Easier said than done, though.
100%, 100%, 100%. It's a work in progress, and nothing worth getting is going to be easy, right?
No, I tell myself that all the time. If it was easy, if this shit was easy, everyone would be doing it. That's why it's hard. That's why it's only I don't want to start being like, oh, the 1% or the 5%, but that's why a lot of people might stay in a job that they're not that passionate about, or they might not follow the scent of the things that give them energy, or they might not, find a way to volunteer, because it's hard, this stuff, and it's hard trying to bring it all together.
No, 100%, 100%. But then if I can go back and I think about the conversations that we've had, there are times where that I will say to you as well, Alice, I've got no idea what I'm doing around my marketing. Like, I know I'm flying on the seat of my pants and I've built up a really strong brand, but what does this look like to scale? And you said things to me and I'm sitting in front of you because I've got no idea what the hell I'm going on about. My personal brand has been excellent, which is really great. But how do I scale this? How do I bring in a team? How do I make this different? And we've had those conversations where I realized that I'm not going to give the impression to individuals that I know exactly what I'm doing. But what I will defer to is I'll defer to people like you and others who have that area of expertise and go, just tell me. I don't know shit. Sorry, pardon my language. I just don't know it. So please, in this area, please tell me. I know what I'm good at, but I know at the end of the day, there are going to be certain areas that I wobble in. But that's what I'm saying again around this personal advisory board, is that people like me and you, when we have our conversations, we've created a space to be safe enough to go, I haven't got a bloody clue. I'm absolutely terrified. I'm feeling like an imposter. This person has told me that they haven't got the budget for what I'm doing, and I'm actually discounting a little bit of the price here. Or I go into this space and they don't want to buy it because they're so used to getting it free. We have all those conversations. But the whole point, should I say, of having a support mechanism is sometimes when we are, what's the phrase I shared with you? Sometimes when we aren't motivated, that's okay as long as we have a system in place that will support us. And systems will beat motivation every single time.
Yeah, I think those networks are so important. Okay. So since I have got someone I would say is probably the best public speaker that I've ever seen, I think it would be remiss for myself and my listeners to not get some of the key tips that you have. Yeah. I've got a feeling that you might be repeating one of these themes in a second, which is about authenticity, but maybe I've just made some assumptions there.
No, that's fine. I'll avoid it then. I'll do all I can to avoid it. So public speaking, first and foremost, for me, know your subject matter. That's the first thing. Don't go and speak about something that you don't know about. I made that mistake a couple of times when I first started out, where people were very excited about the fact that I knew my way on stage, and then they would give me some topics to speak about, and I would go in there I've done it once or twice, and I went in there and I winged it. And I have never felt so much stress and anxiety in my life, because I know when I'm talking about my subject area, I know how people respond to me. And for me, that first bit about knowing what it is that you're good at and knowing that area, I will research in and out around inclusive leadership, around culture change, around storytelling, around mentoring. Those things I will know. And there are others, okay, fundraising, entrepreneurship, that I know. I don't necessarily speak about them as much, but I'm not going onto a stage to talk about something unless I'm an expert. So I have to know my subject matter. That's the first thing. The second thing for me is your audience. You have to be able to know who your audience is, so you can tailor and you can shape your presentation according to who the actual audience is yourself. So I know before I came to, when we first met, when I was given the brief about Marketing Academy, these are these individuals who are going to come from this area. They're all into marketing, but this is what we're looking for to these are the 3 key points we really want them to go and find some energy on. And can you bring confidence to this space? And so I'm like, okay, I've got to be confident on stage first and foremost. So I'm going to be a bit vulnerable, all right, and tell people about my weaknesses, but I'm also going to tell them about my strengths. I'm also going to tap it into the job that they do. I get that, and I know my audience. And once I've done that, okay, at the end of the day, I'll say, look, there's going to be 1%, there's going to be 5% in the room, maybe more. Okay, let's go with 10%. They're going to be 10% in the room who think I'm full of crap and they don't really care. That's not my problem. I'm going to go for the 90% that are going to be totally in it, and I'm going to go full energy. The third one for me is around practice. And you know, people always laugh at me when I say this, but I'm constantly practicing and building on my speaking skills all the time. So whether it's, I've done things like stand-up comedy, I've done the Alexander technique, I've done amateur dramatics, I've done improv, I've done rhetoric, I've understood debate, I've been able to, I've done a TED talk, I've done 3 TED talks, TEDx talks even. I've spoken at all this stuff. I'm constantly learning, because for me to stop doing that will mean that I'm not paying enough respect to my craft. And if individuals are going to give me an hour of their attention, I need to make sure that that's not an hour that they have given up and they thought that would never happen, you know, that they would have lost. I want to be able to add value. So I practice my content. I practice how I'm going to present, whether I'm doing it virtually or in person. And if I'm going to go and give a presentation, that presentation will probably have been rehearsed 4 or 5 times, even though I've done a similar speech before I go to do it again. So when I go on stage, if somebody objects and they've got a question or they want to challenge me, I've already put myself into the state to go, right, if that question has been asked, you know me already, right? If I don't know the answer, I'm like, I got no idea whatsoever, okay? But if I do know the answer, I'm going to come in all guns a-blazing. So the practice bit is important for me. And the last bit I will say is about feedback. Always get feedback but getting feedback for me is important from people who understand what feedback you're looking for. Because someone could say to you, oh my God, that was brilliant. That was the best speech. And then you're kind of like thinking, okay, how does, you know, but was there anything else I could do different? And so I use a little formula called the WIN formula, right? Tell me what I did well. Tell me how I can improve, and then tell me what was notable, because you want me to win, right? So What did I do well? What is it that really resonated with you? What could I improve? Usually people tell me to slow down. That's my big one because I get so excited. But slow down, Len. We need to really slow down. And then what was notable? So one thing that stood out in your mind that you thought, right, I could really act on this. And those things are part and parcel of my toolkit. And there are wider things, but I thought I'll go with those four. So knowing your subject matter, knowing the audience who you're going to speak to, practice, always continued practice. Is a craft that you've got to develop on continuously. And then the fourth one is around feedback. Make sure you get feedback from individuals as to what worked, how can improve, and what was really notable.
I love the framework WIN. I use it all the time, actually. It's such an easy one to implement.
100%.
And I think the notable point's actually quite important because it's not saying something's good or bad, but it's saying that it stands out, which is a good thing to know about. So yeah, I would highly recommend to our listeners to give the WIN framework a try for feedback. It's a really good tool. Okay, so let's move on from public speaking to talk a little bit more about how you show up on LinkedIn, because I think one of the things that it's been amazing to watch you do, and I've had friends of mine who follow you because I've commented on a post and now they're completely in love with you like everybody else is. But the way that you show up on LinkedIn is very bold, because I think particularly with some of the clients that you're working with, these are big blue chip banks, these are, really, really, really big players. You're quite controversial and you say some pretty controversial things.
Yes.
Talk us through a bit more about how you found your voice on LinkedIn. Has it ever gotten you into trouble, and what we can learn from you about it?
Yeah. Have I gotten into trouble about it? Not trouble per se, but I have had gentle emails from clients who were like, I'm not quite sure about that GIF you used today, Dave, or you were swearing, and people know that we're aligned with you. But I make it very clear to my clients, and I have done so for a number of years now. I say, look, what you see is what you get. What you see online is what you're going to see when I go into your boardroom. I'm going to tell you you're full of shit. If you're full of shit, I'm going to go and I'm going to use colorful language because I think it's contextual. I'm never going to use, I will never use a swear at a personal. I won't call a person an effing whatever this, or I won't do that personally.
This is a swearing open podcast, by the way. So you've expressed yourself however you want.
All right. So I'm being mindful here. This goes to my whole point, right? But I'm not going to go in there and go, oh, this person's a fucking prick. I'm not going to do that online, because for me, that takes away from it being, if I go with an ad hominem or personal attack, I'm missing the whole point here. But I will be very passionate about stuff, but I will also use compassion. So say, for example, today, as we're recording this today, one of the posts I did today was around the trickiness of navigating the conversation around the umbrella term transgender. And I was watching a video with Ricky Gervais, and he was doing a comedy special for Netflix, and a lot of the content that he was producing for a number of people will be considered transphobic, and for another group of people they would just go, well, it's just comedy, rather than just seeing it as quite personal. And for me, I'm a great believer of being able to have my truths challenged. And there are times where I will put something out because it's in my head. I'm like, I'm really struggling with this, and I'm trying to be able to get an answer. I don't specifically have an answer, but I think it's important to be able to do that. And I realize I can do this because I run my own business, and my business is global. And people have come to realize that this is what actually comes with the territory. And my voice has changed over time, especially when I started to do less youth work. I became a lot more bold in using what people would call profanity or swearing in my content, because I'm like, we're all grown adults. If you don't like it, I can use it. It's contextual. If you get offended by it, that's your choice. It's got nothing to do with me. People choose to be offended whether they want to. That's not my context. I'm going to speak my mind. And what I've realized, especially when we're talking about things like inclusion, is that people are afraid of having subjects in the open. I remember I wrote a post a little while back where I was talking about South Asian men being used as a diversity get out card. And I was saying that, if you look across tech and a lot of industries and consulting, there are a lot of Indian men in positions of real power, and organizations will use that as a get out card to say, right, we're diverse. We don't have a racist bone in our body, yet go and have, but when you go and have a look at all the other data and you see Asia Pacific women who don't get into positions of leadership, or excuse me, or black women, or any other demographic, or even, you know, or just women as a whole, it's easy for people to pick up that singular card and go, well, this is what makes us. We're diverse, and this is our proof of it. You know, you think about the government at the moment, there is if you look at it on the surface, it's one of the most diverse in terms of racial and ethnic and gender representation cabinets we've had for a while. But then if you peel it back a layer, they're all very, very similar in that they're very Thatcherite. So their approach to politics is very, very similar, even though they've come back. So you kind of go, okay, on the face, it looks quite diverse, but when you peel back what they believe in, my God, everybody's the same in there. And so no one's really going to challenge the status quo. And my thing is not to be afraid to have that conversation, and not to be afraid to be proven wrong, not to be afraid to have your truths challenged and then go, do you know what? You're actually, you're quite right. I got it wrong here. I'll give you one last example if I can. Last week, I did a post where I spoke about Rebel Wilson being outed in Australia. And the journalist who did it literally gave her 2 days to respond to being seen as bisexual or a lesbian. And I wrote a post where I was like, do you know what? It's really troubling when you're working with somebody who identifies as LGBT plus or non-heterosexual, and they are outed by force. And I attached the picture of Rebel Wilson to obviously put my point across, thinking like everybody's read the story and they really get it. But then 2 people challenged me and just said, well, David, aren't you doing exactly the same thing when this individual wanted privacy, but here you are using her photo to get your point across? And I said, you know what? You actually got a really good point here. That I'm going to take that as a lesson learned. I'm not going to take the post down, but I'm going to leave it up, because I believe if other people are looking, I want them to see the lesson that I had to learn, the humble pie that I had to eat, and recognize that even with the best intentions in the world, I got it wrong in attaching that photo. The principle still stays the same, but the way I passed that message was wrong. And I'll throw my hands up and go, I've got no problem admitting when I've gone wrong, because I know when I'm going out on a limb and talking about subjects that may be quite controversial, I may end up actually doing some kind of damage in trying to get my point over. So I have to be compassionate. I have to be aware. And my thing is look, I'm not doing this just to get people provoked, but I'm doing it to say that I'm on this journey. I know how difficult it is to make this change. This may resonate with you or it may not, but I want to be able to go, instead of hiding, what can we put out in the open that allows us to move it forward?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important, and you've spoken about this before on LinkedIn around kind of intent.
Yes.
When making mistakes, we all have, I think you were quite open about the fact that we've all said the wrong thing sometimes, and we haven't realized that we've been offensive, or we've laughed at a joke that we probably shouldn't have at a party or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that actually, if we just take a step back and ask the place in which that comes from, a lot of the time it's an accident, or it's misunderstood.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing people overstepping the mark here, but I do think that it's important to take a step back and recognize with what intent somebody was using a term or made a mistake.
No, 100%. And I, one of the things I'm consciously aware of, and the conversation that goes through my mind, is I don't want to be virtue signaling out here that I've got all my shit together. I'm like, we have, when I talk about, again, there are issues that I've spoken about around homophobia, and I know exactly my journey and where I've come from. I was talking last week about phrases that are used when the musician Lizzo used the word spazzing out, part of the song, and she got challenged by that. I was like, it really, I think it's so important to be open about this, because I know that I've used phrases like spaz or moron or spastic or dumb and all these kinds of stuff just as a throwaway terms. But then when you've spoken to somebody who's had those phrases pointed at them because of a disability or a difference, you realize this is not just a throwaway stuff that you can just have as a point of banter. And so when you realize it does come up, you can actually have an honest conversation and say, I do feel uncomfortable about that. I'm not telling you you've got to change, but for me, it makes me really uncomfortable, and that's why I won't use it. And so the honesty for me is around going, there are lots of people who want to have this conversation, but they're too afraid because they think they need to be perfect. And I'm like, no, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to realize, now I know better. I want to do better. but I recognize that I've got a truckload of shit and a truckload of issues that I still need to deal with, both in my past and my present, but I'm trying to get better at this piece.
Love it. And let's talk about that bit about not being perfect and about showing up, because a lot of the people that I speak to through my work, there's a resistance to posting on LinkedIn or going after that side hustle or pursuing their dreams. I think in large part because of embarrassment. They worry about what people think of them. They worry that they're being laughed at behind their backs. They're worried about actually admitting to the fact that perhaps they want something that's less ordinary. I don't mean that less ordinary, but that they want more from something. They're not prepared to just kind of carry on with the things they've been doing.
Yes.
The imposter. How do you think about that stuff? And what could our listeners maybe take away from that?
So let me throw something about it being an imposter out. And this is a work in progress for me. The whole concept of imposter syndrome is a nonsense. I'm going to throw that out there first and foremost. And I'm going to contextualize it as well. I'll explain.
Ooh.
I'm going to explain now. All right. So first and foremost, it's not a syndrome. Okay. It's not a syndrome. Let's get that out of the way. If you technically go and have a look at what a syndrome is in the dictionary, it's not a syndrome. If we actually want to use the correct phrase, it's a phenomenon. All right. And so it's something that happens because of the environment that we're in. So imagine this. You spend all your time studying, getting really good results, top of your class, absolutely brilliant. You do all the extracurricular, you get to university, you land a job at this amazing organization, you do all these things, you're brilliant at it, and then you're an imposter? That makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But then when you slice it back, what you realize is that you're in schools and sometimes you're told you're never good enough until you get an A. And so you strive to get an A, all right? Or you have a parent who goes, you get an A, you need an A+, all right? And then someone tells you that you need to work twice as hard to get half as much, whether you're a woman, whether you are working class, whether you're from a racial or ethnic minority group, or whatever it is. Then people tell you you've got to work twice as hard to get half as much. And then you go into a working place and you go and you want to get to a certain position and you look around and, you know, you want to be in the C-suite and you look in the C-suite and there aren't people who look like you or share that experience, and you do stuff and then you kind of like go, oh my God, I'm not good enough. That has nothing to do with us. When we really think about it, that has nothing to do with us. That's constantly systems around us that have told us we're not good enough. That doesn't mean we're not good enough. Often we are overqualified for a position. Often we are best placed to be able to do stuff. So all of a sudden we hear this thing, like, oh my God, I'm in this space and I feel like an imposter. Why? Why would you feel like an imposter when you're damn good at your job, when you've got the qualifications, when you've got the experience, when your performance review comes back every time and tells you that you are not only achieving, but you're above overachieving, when you speak to your peers and they go, you're an absolute value to what it is that you bring. The reason why we feel like an imposter is because over a long period of time, so many different institutions and spaces have told us that we're not worthy enough. And I say that as an individual. If I can give you my own experience, there are times where I will go into a room, more often than not, I'll go into a room in my audience where I'm a minority as a speaker, all right, more often than not. And very often I find myself as a default trying to make people feel safe. That's what I do. I'll use humor. All right. I'll use humor just so that if anybody's got this worry about who this booming voice 6'2" black guy who's going to come in there and tell her, I've got this narrative going on in my head, and then I have to switch out of it. But it's there. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it's there because historically I've been told by my family and people around me, don't intimidate people. Don't make them frightened. Don't go and swear. Don't tell a joke that's going to make them feel very uncomfortable. And so I'm having this constant conversation in my head. And then I take a step out and I go, yeah, but who's the real Dave? Forget the persona. Forget all the bits I've got to do to fit into this. Who's the real Dave and how is he going to show up? And the moment I'm really in a position of agency to take hold of that, I no longer feel like an imposter. And you know that I've said this to you, where when you go to do a presentation or when we go into a space, first and foremost, we have this thinking, oh my God, I'm so glad that I've been able to. I remember when you were working at Deliveroo and we had this conversation, I was like, oh my God, I'm really glad to be working for this really big company. And then you realize, and I'll say this respectfully, that you've gone in and you're probably smarter than a hell of a lot of the people that you saw in them, even those ones in positions of senior leadership over you, all right? So then we move from, oh my God, I'm really lucky to be here, to, hold on a minute, I actually deserve to be here because I'm really smart, I'm really clever, I deliver. And yes, there may be bits that I don't know, but the bits that I do know, I'm really good at this. And then we move on to the next level where we're like, you know what, actually, you're really lucky to have me because I added value when I walked into this room. And for me, that only comes across when we take ourselves away from all the expectations that people have thrown on us about what we should do and double down on recognizing, you know, I'm really good at this. I'll say to you now, okay, watching your journey in Badass and what you've done and your delivery and the feedback that people give to you and the testimonials that people give to you and the people who speak about you, you're not an imposter. You're an amazing person who does it. You're doing your podcast now. I've said this and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. You are amazing at what it is that you do. People will exchange money to be in your presence, okay? People will pay to do this. That for me is evidence of your amazingness as well as the testimonials. Every now and again, the little imposter thing may show up in your head, but that's systemic. And I'm saying that too often people will throw out this concept of the imposter stuff and it stops us from being as excellent as we can. And part of our badassery, part of our magnificence, part of what we do, part of the space where we realize we are unicorns rather than rhinos, right? Is because we go there and we realize our uniqueness. And so for me, I spend, as you know, I spend a lot of time saying, okay, there is a voice that will go in your head that may question stuff. Shut that voice down because you're not an imposter. You deserve to be there.
Okay, let's do a little bit of live coaching.
Yes.
So, as you know, I have been trying to grow my social media channels and presence.
Yes.
And I've done fairly well on LinkedIn. I think, no, I was about to start being passively aggressive to myself, and I just stopped myself. I was about to say, oh, people followed me when I was at Deliveroo because I work for Deliveroo, and I have now shared that comment as bullshit because we're just going to catch our inner monologue language there. But I am struggling to grow my Instagram following. It's been something that I've been trying to do for the best part of like fucking 10 years trying to grow this channel, and I just haven't been able to crack the recipe. And it hasn't been from lack of trying. I'm not saying that I've thrown the kitchen sink at it, but I really have given it a good go. And I can't help but feel like a bit of an imposter because I feel like I've got the skills, I've got the know-how, I've got the gift, I've got a good product, but for whatever reason, people aren't following me or enough people aren't liking my content. So I'm not growing in the way that I want to, and then I'm not getting the overt success metrics that I want. How would you pull that apart? Okay.
So the question I'm going to ask you is why is it so important to you to grow your audience on Instagram as opposed to on your own space where you hold the content?
Because it's a way of attracting new people to me who haven't heard of me. So I'm growing the funnel, the top of the funnel. There is definitely some ego going on here about, followers are basically today's currency for popularity, but it also gives you credibility, right? If people landed on my page and I had 5,000 followers, perhaps they'd be more likely to follow me or buy my course than now when I'm at 1,000.
How many followers do you have on Insta?
Just under 1,000.
How many followers do you have on LinkedIn?
4,500.
Where do you think your audience is?
I think they are on LinkedIn, but I also do think they're on Instagram, although I've got another person telling me, challenging that as well.
I'm not saying it's not, but my challenge to you would be, and taking this as a coaching moment, is to really question as to why or what beliefs you have around Instagram being that holy grail, as opposed to LinkedIn, where you've got 4 times as much and probably higher engagement. Think about it this way, right? LinkedIn aren't shadow blocking you the way that Instagram has shadow blocked a lot of individuals. LinkedIn doesn't require you to put in a reel because now that they no longer feel that the photos are going to be as applicable. It doesn't require you to put in a reel, but you can put, you use video, all right? You know that you've got really good engagement around video. And I would say that the challenge I have for you is I'm going to use a term really loosely here, but the dependency or the notion that you have around your idea around Instagram may be misplaced.
Okay. And so to any of our listeners who are resonating with this, how could they apply it to themselves? Is it about understanding what kind of baggage or drivers or belief systems are causing you to view something in a certain way?
Yeah, 100%. And don't get me wrong, I think LinkedIn, Insta, Twitter, TikTok, whatever those platforms are an amazing way of being able to drive traffic to you are. But if somebody said to me, Dave, if you could start from scratch now and choose one social media platform where you could really reach people and have the massive impact, do you know which one I would choose? You ready? OnlyFans.
What's OnlyFans?
Don't know OnlyFans?
No.
Okay. So OnlyFans is a subscription-based, people pay a subscription to be able to get access to your content, be it around videos, be it around photos, be it what have you.
Now, right, so it's kind of like Patreon, a bit like Patreon.
Yeah, a bit like Patreon. It's got a bit of a bad press now because a lot of sex workers are on there, all right?
Oh, this is the one where you ask for a pic, like people send someone shoes and they send you
yeah, they made you toes, right? So people make 10,000 a month from toes or what have right, okay.
We're in the wrong business, mate. We need to be on foot fetishes.
Right, exactly. But what I love about OnlyFans as a business model, and there's another one there's another platform that I know works really well, is called Fanbase. People are actually exchanging, and this is in terms of business, right? Because we're looking at this from a business point of view. People are actually paying for your service on OnlyFans or Fanbase or Patreon or any one of those platforms. They're subscribing to your actual way of working. There are individuals, and I remember this happened. Oh, what was her name? Is it Billie Eilish? Might be Billie Eilish. I may be misquoting. But there was somebody online who was a really popular singer and had over 1 million followers, released a book, and no one bought it. No one bought it. Million followers. Happy to click and like your pictures when you're online and you're with Justin Bieber or doing a concert or what have you. But you then go to sell products, you don't have it. Neither on that platform do you have access to those individuals who are going to be subscribed to you, unless in your link, you do a link tree or a profile and they can subscribe to a lead magnet and go onto your newsletter or what have you. And part of the challenge, I feel like, I think about my LinkedIn. I've got just over 40,000 followers on LinkedIn, okay? And I think a lot of it's through controversy or what people perceive as controversy. People have highlighted and shared. I've seen a lot of share and engagement in it. To be fair with you, most of my engaging posts are when I share my wife or my daughters, all right? Let's get that out there now. When I put my wife and my daughters out there, that's the most engagement I get, full stop.
Yeah, and same with the baby, yeah.
Right. But there are still lots of people who are out there, who are following, who have literally bought into my company and have brought over 6 figures worth of revenue client base as a result of LinkedIn. And what I realized is that was where my base was. But even though I had a really good following there, I still needed to convert those individuals into paying customers who will work with me. And so part of why I raised the OnlyFans one is because you are in control of the customer journey there. You are in control of that level of engagement. The difficulty with a TikTok, an Instagram, or wherever else we're doing these massive platforms, they're built on the concept of an advertising model, right? That's what they're doing. Really is about an advertising model. So what you're then doing is you're getting followers to get that engagement, to get more people to come to you, which allows that organization to sell more advertising. That's nothing to do with you. That's nothing to do with you. So when you flip it back, Instagram, yes, absolutely popular. I would rather say, do you know what? Forget about growing it more, but how can you get half of those 1,000 people who are there to be really, really engaged in the services and the products and the stuff that I really do? What are the special offers that you can do? What does it look like to actually be part of that tribe? Because until you're actually getting the contact with those individuals, until you're actually getting the conversion rate, you can have 50,000, but if you do a course and then people aren't buying it, then what's the point? And so for me, I'll flip it back again and say, be really mindful of where your market is. Be really mindful that Badass Unicorn is I'll say the personal brand that is Alistair Hart is an amazing product in and of itself. all those other social media channels are there to complement you, not to dictate the way you want to be able to make your message out to the world.
Yeah, I'm definitely tail wagging the dog at the moment with Instagram.
Yeah.
I literally just ripped up my social media strategy last week with my new stable fairy and was like, fuck this, we're only doing reels. We're going to play Instagram at their own game. Here we go. Bang, bang, bang.
And they're leading it, right? I don't know if I told you, but I closed my Instagram account in December. I was like, I just can't be asked. I don't need to, whatever, it's fine. People who need to know me, I'll send you a bloody image on WhatsApp and you can see how stuff is going with my family. My social media team came in and they said, right there, we're gonna go and do it. And I go, right, fine. I don't want to get involved. I don't even want to know. I've got maybe about 500 or so followers on Instagram. I don't even know who they are. I don't even know if I've got messages. Why? Because that's not where my energy is focused. My energy is focused on building that tribe and then using the tools that work for me to be able to do that. So if that's LinkedIn, which is the main one, fine. If it's my newsletter, that's absolutely fine. I don't care about anything else.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. I think we should draw to a close because I could keep you here all day and I'm sure everyone could carry on listening to you. But I hope that I've given everybody a really good chance to pick your brains, a term that you hate, that you've personally outed on LinkedIn as being despicable, and now I can't ever use it in any serious way.
You can, it's me. You can do that.
I love it. No, pick your brains. It is a horrible idea. I like when people say it to me now. I'm like, oh, why do you want to stick something in my ear and like pull out my brains? That's so rank. But while we've got you, is there any pieces of advice that we haven't covered through the course of today's recording that you think it's worth sharing? And can you also give us your best piece of career advice?
Okay. So let me talk about the pick your brain one first. When you are in a position where people see the value that you have added, people will want to have that personally. And, you know, we've had this conversation before about mentoring. I'm very selective about who I mentor. I make no apologies about it. I reject most people who will come to mentor me, even though I'm going to slightly change it now, but I'll talk to you about that offline, right? But even though in the main, I have capacity for a few people that I can mentor in any given year or across a number of years. And what I realize is look, there's a lot of content that I put out that if you really want to pick my brain, don't be lazy, go and search it. Go on LinkedIn, and if there's a specific area that you want around business, around mentoring, around enterprise, I can guarantee you, if you go and type in David McQueen and put the name beside it, you can find that content somewhere else. Or in a podcast that I featured in like this, you can go and do it. What I find people do when they're looking to pick their brain is they want to get the shortcut. They want to be lazy, not do the heavy lifting, and just go in and think that they're going to get things handed on a plate. You and I know from the conversations that we've had over here, you're not going to get anything handed on a plate. If anything else, you're going to get roughed up. I'm going to throw the toys out the pram and do it with love, but make sure that, you know, you're going in that direction. So for me, I that's why I said to people, if you really want to pick my brain, pay for it. And I remember saying to people, yeah, if you want to have a cup of coffee with me, it's 500 quid. And they were like, what? And I go, yeah, that's the value I'm going to attach to it. It's gone up now. I've put it to $1,000 now. All right. It's $1,000. Like, what to pick? Look, if you wanted to go to Warren Buffett, I think it's like something like 150 grand. And he's probably just going to go and tell you, follow what I did, do this, do that, boom, boom, boom. Right, this burger's nice, isn't it? And keep it moving. But $1,000, because it works in two ways. It's a deterrent to stop people from taking advantage of my free time and stop doing the lazy work. But if somebody pays me $1,000, I will tell you this now, Alice, you're going to get 10 grand's worth and more of advice in that moment. Because for me, it's got to be that value piece. So the picking the brain thing is I don't have a problem with it, just as long as people know what the value is that's going to come as a result of it. And it's not going to happen for free. And so in terms of career advice, the biggest bit of career advice I would say is just to know your skill set and be forever curious. Know what your skill set is and be constantly curious. And so what I mean by the skill set is when, you know, if you're going to go for a job, or even if you're going to go and run your own business, know what you're really good at and delegate the rest. Know what you're good at and delegate the rest, but stay curious. Always be learning. You've never reached anywhere. And there are people who think that they've got to get to a certain space by the time they're 30. We've had this conversation, right?
Me.
I'm 50, as I said before, I'm 53 and I'm still learning. Always learning. There's always some great stuff. I'm like, wow, I didn't know about it before. And for me, the curiosity has got to be childlike as well. You know, when we first discover something as a child, we're like, wow, that's amazing. Keep it all the way through adulthood. the things that I've learned in the last year, and we were halfway through, you know, the year, and in June, I've looked at them, I'm like, bloody hell, that's amazing. Go with that childlike curiosity. And for me, that kind of like keeps you on your toes. There are other things that come as a result of it, but know what your skill set is and keep a real childlike curiosity about your own learning. Always be learning, and then being able to enjoy the journey you're on.
Love it. What a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, Dave.
Always appreciated. Always a pleasure, Alice. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.